$10,000 a month. A gentleman was paying $10,000 a month for care. His whole life he had worked and saved for these assets and these resources. And at $10,000 a month, he was blowing through his assets so quickly. One of the people that I work with more than probably just about anyone else is going to share with us today and try and help us to make better decisions and to plan a little earlier. In case you haven't landed here before, my name is Julie Roca, and you have found the podcast Aging Gracefully with Julie Roca. And today, I've brought one of my favorite people, Minerva Santiago, an elder law attorney here in Florida that I met a couple of years ago after you moved up from the Miami area. Yeah. And we've just really hit it off, and we end up working together quite a bit. Yeah. So tell me, what's your why? How did you decide to become a lawyer?
Decide to become a lawyer? Since I was probably about 6 years old, I was one of those kids that just loved watching those court TV shows and knew early on that law is what I wanted to practice.
Okay. So you were like a Judge Judy fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Loved it. Yeah. So, and I never steered away from it.
That is funny. Yeah. And what brought you to elder law?
So when I first started practicing in 2000, I started off initially doing personal injury law. Not because I liked it, just because that's what came easy because of the business my father had, and my brother had already been a personal injury attorney. Oh, okay. So that's what came easy, but I wasn't happy doing it. But when I got pregnant with my first child, he was diagnosed with autism early on, and so that kind of changed things for me. I became a stay-at-home mom for a little bit, and then my second son was born. He also had autism. Wow. And so just dealing with the special needs, for me, I mean, for anybody, I think that has somebody with special needs in their lives, that when the person depends on them, right. For me, I was just so scared of what's going to happen to them when I'm not here. Yes. And, I had to learn how to be their best advocate for everything, for education, for benefits, and then thinking long-term with regards to my own planning, special needs trusts and all of that. So I just kind of ended up learning everything I needed to do for my own children, and started doing it for other individuals. And so getting involved with public benefits, Medicaid, and everything, I naturally just landed doing elder law.
Yeah. And that makes great sense, but you also do still work with special needs families as well, right?
I do. Yeah. They're so near and dear to my heart.
And not only that, I mean, like, I'm not special needs, but I've realized over the years the value of planning ahead and making sure that you've put plans in place, because we never know what's going to happen. You never know. I mean, I'm not quite 50. My husband's just over 50, and we feel like we're healthy and we're doing well, but you could have an accident, and all of a sudden, your estate is up for grabs if you don't have any plans in place. Your kids may or may not be planned for. But one of the things that I see in my line of business way more often than I need to is that people never assigned someone power of attorney. They never said, hey, I want you to be my healthcare surrogate. Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, so this might be the curveball I'm throwing you. But so tell me, what happens if you do not have that put in place and you lose your cognition? And you cannot
then in order for anybody to make decisions for you, then you have to go through a guardianship proceeding. And a guardianship proceeding is expensive. And it's really stressful for the family.
Yeah.
And it really, so with a guardianship, when you set up a guardianship, it's not something that ends.
Right.
It's an ongoing process with the court. So you're constantly spending money on this guardianship proceeding for as long as it lasts. And the only way that the guardianship is removed is if you regain your capacity or if the person dies. Yeah. And so then funds are restricted, so family members can't access it if they need it. You need the court's permission to use money that the person owns.
Right.
So it becomes it's a nightmare, really. I mean,
It's a nightmare.
yeah, it is a nightmare.
Yeah. So, that being said, when can you go ahead and set that up? How old do you need to be before you can set a power of attorney, before you can have a healthcare surrogate? Because, like I am fine. I'm fully cognitive and aware, and I can do everything for myself. So why would I consider doing that?
So you can set it up as early as soon as you turn 18.
18, yeah.
And I usually recommend that for parents, to make sure they have 18 years, especially if they're going away to college. They forget that they're now adults, and now they can make their own decisions. And now if you need medical records or you need anything for them, make decisions for them, you no longer have the power to just say, hey, I'm mom.
Yeah, exactly.
I can do this for him.
Exactly. So if they're, God forbid, in an accident or something and they're knocked unconscious for days, they can't make any decisions for themselves, and neither can you.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a nightmare. Yeah. So even at 18, you can go ahead and set that up and make sure that you've got somebody that can speak for you. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah. I also prepare them sometimes for when there's minor children, like the parents set up like they'll execute documents to appoint temporary guardians to make decisions for their child. If they're incapacitated and they have a minor child, they have somebody named they can name temporary guardians and permanent guardians before they become incapacitated. So that's good to have in place as well.
So really, this isn't just about elder law. This isn't something you need to be over 65 to visit. You actually need to visit it when you have small children, too.
At any age, really, because we're all susceptible to accidents. Anything can happen to us any day. So
Yeah,
it's for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So if you haven't talked yet to an elder law attorney at any point in life, I think it's time. You need to find one. So no matter where you are, you definitely need to find one. But one of the things that I just desperately needed to bring you in to talk about is Medicaid.
Okay.
Here in the state of Florida, we have a bunch of senior citizens here. They flock down here because the weather is beautiful and everyone wants to retire here. And then, they find out $2,000 doesn't go very far. No. And when they start to need care, then we have to start talking about long-term care Medicaid and that long-term care Medicaid waiver. And one of the questions I actually answered even today is, oh my goodness, mom has a house. Yeah. Do we lose the house if we apply for long-term care Medicaid?
Yes, I hear that question often.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe there's, I guess, enough information on Google where, it's a little bit dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Yes, and I've had people actually not refuse to apply for Medicaid under that misconception that they're going to lose their house.
Yeah.
So there is something that's called Medicaid estate recovery, that once the individual who's on Medicaid dies, then Medicaid can put a lien on any probatable assets that they have. And if they own a home, then they could put a lien on the home. But if you prepare properly and you have things in place, there's tools you can use which would prevent that from happening.
And you said the key word is probatable property, right? So any property that has not gone, you've not gone through the processes to plan ahead, then the state has the right to take it and probate, right?
Well, they put a lien on it, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So other questions that are asked, and I'm sorry, I lost my notes.
It's okay.
So as long as Medicaid applicants' funds are under $2,000, does it matter how the applicant spends the money?
Yes, it matters. Okay. So I often get clients who come to the office and they have funds. Most people know that the Medicaid limit is $2,000, so you can only have $2,000 in assets. Anything above that, you need to do something with it. Right. And usually you go see an elder law attorney because they know the ways that are the transactions that you can make that wouldn't disqualify you for Medicaid. Yes.
That's why I send people to
Yes.
you before they do anything.
Thank you. So yes, there are specific ways. Like there's several tools you can use when you're trying to qualify for Medicaid. So we kind of call it like you have a toolbox, and literally we talk to our clients about the different options they have and which one is right for you, because it's not a one size fits all. And if a client decides that, let's say they have $20,000, so obviously they're above the $2,000 limit, they have $20,000. Yeah. They don't see that there's a reason to spend money or do any of these other planning tools. They decide they just want to spend down what they have. Well, in that case, yes, you can spend it down. You could spend it down like on creditors. You could spend it down on the person's healthcare needs, things that you can spend it for things that the individual needs.
Including funeral planning, right?
Yes. So funeral planning is something that we always encourage individuals to do if they're going to do spend down. And what Medicaid really looks at is whether they're paying fair market value for things.
Yeah.
So they can't give away the $20,000 and, they purchase something that's worth $5.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. No, that does.
So they're just making sure that the transactions you're making are actually for fair market value. And you could spend it on, those kind of things. Also, you could spend it on repairing your home. You could buy a new home. There's just different things.
Yeah. Because it's for your care still.
Yes.
Now, if you have a car, for example, can you gift that to your grandson?
You cannot gift it.
Okay.
You can sell it for fair market value.
Okay.
But you cannot gift it.
So, and I hear that regularly. People will say, well, I stopped driving my car and my grandson needed a car, so I gave him my $40,000 vehicle. Yeah. And Medicaid sees that. How many years do they look back?
So it depends. There's the 5-year look-back period, so they'll look back at any transaction. And then if you gave something away, there's a calculation that calculates the penalty period. So let's say if you did do one of these transactions within the past 5 years, then there's a calculation that'll tell you how many months you have to wait till now you can get on Medicaid.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Regardless of what care level you're at.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Man. So in the beginning, I mentioned a client that we both shared who was spending $10,000 a month, which to me, I mean, man, it takes a while to earn $10,000. And he had money just flying out. And he thought, there's no way that I can get any kind of assistance. Share with us a little bit about that story.
So he had been paying for his wife's care, who was in a nursing home. She had advanced dementia, and he could no longer care for her. And he was paying over $10,000 a month. Yes. And when I met him, he had already been doing that for over a year. Yeah, he had. And when I met him, the interesting thing is that he said that somebody had spoken to him or mentioned going to an attorney to do planning, Medicaid planning. And he said that he hadn't gone before because he thought it was going to be too expensive to work with an attorney to get the planning done, which just blew my mind. So fortunately, he did end up coming to me, and we were able to help him out. And within a few months, his wife did get qualified for Medicaid, and now he's not paying anything for her care.
I love that, because when I met him, he was so distraught and so upset. I know it. And I told him, I said, you need to get in touch with an elder law attorney. And he said, oh, but that's going to be so expensive. And I said, well, you consider it. I said, let's say it's $10,000. I said, so you might have to pay $10,000. I said, you're paying that every month. What if they could help you to greatly minimize your monthly cost or completely cover it? And he was blown away by that. But Boaz tells me all the time, he says, you got to just tell these people that sometimes you have to spend a little money to save a considerable amount. That's a considerable amount of money to save.
And he would have gone through all of the money that he'd be left with nothing for his own care.
And that's what was happening.
Yeah.
And when I met him, I mean, his despair was so thick that I just thought, man, there must be a lot of people out there that feel this way and that just have never been told.
Yeah.
So I'm really appreciative. I know you and Boaz work really hard to inform people and to educate. You've got all kinds of great educational programs here. Actually, if any of you are in Gainesville and want to know more about estate planning, what Minerva can offer, you have a Wills and Wine event. Like, how often?
We try to do it monthly.
Okay.
Yeah. Some months, if something comes up that it's too hectic, we may have to skip a month every now and then. But we try to get to it monthly. Yeah.
So, so if they want to be in contact with you and they want to go to like your Wills and Wine or something like that, I'm going to have a link on the site so that they can click on it and you can find Minerva. Boaz will give you a 15-minute consultation conversation, right?
Correct. I think we should probably explain who Boaz is.
Oh, I am so sorry. So, because Minerva and I are very good friends, I don't even think that everybody doesn't know who Boaz is, but Boaz is Minerva's best friend and husband.
Yes. My husband works with me. He's the first point of contact when you contact our office, and everybody probably likes him more than they like me.
I don't think that's
kind of
true.
person.
That's not true.
He's very kind and he's wonderful with our clients, and I'm very grateful to have him work with us. He's an asset.
Yeah, he is a great asset.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions that I was about to skip over, and I don't want to, is do you have to have a trust in order to qualify for Medicaid?
The answer is it depends.
Okay.
So Medicaid looks at both income and your assets to qualify. And so if you have too much income, then yes, you most likely need a trust. Yeah. But if it's...
And what is too much income right now?
Just over $2,700.
Yep.
And if you have too much assets, there are trusts that are in our toolkit that may be an option, but not necessarily required for you to qualify for Medicaid.
And what about spouses? Do they need to take all the money? If you do get Medicaid and you do go into a skilled nursing facility, does the spouse then have nothing to live on because they're taking the Social Security or the pension?
Oh, no. The planning that we do will definitely take the spouse into consideration and the spouse's needs. So it really depends on what plan they decide to go with, but that could be where the spouse, the community spouse does keep all of the assets for their own care, or whatever other planning tool they use. But the community spouse is always taken care of.
Yay. I love to hear that because that is a stressor.
It is.
For a lot of the spouses. Yeah. They're afraid that they're going to lose everything and have nothing for themselves and their care. So I wanted to, you had one other story on here that I wanted to ask you about and have you share.
With regards to the house,
yes,
right?
Yep.
Yes. So since we were talking about whether you lose your house or not and what you could spend your money on, I did have a client that came to meet with me. And a lot of times, unfortunately, clients come to meet with us after the fact, like after they've tried to do their own transactions and they were told, no, you don't qualify, and this is why. And in this particular circumstance, it was a situation where the adult daughter for the applicant had reached out, and she said, we sold mom's house, which you really shouldn't do unless you have to, because the homestead property is exempt. Yep. So Medicaid won't count that as an asset towards the $2,000. But they sold it, and they distributed the proceeds to all of the children. And they were like, we did great. We got rid of mom's money. And so I asked, so if you make that kind of transaction where it's not allowed by Medicaid, you can correct it. If all of the children would have been able to get the money back to mom, then you can correct that. But unfortunately, she came to me too late, where one of the kids had already spent some of, I don't know, I don't remember if it was all of it or most of it, but they just couldn't get the money back to her. And so she ended up I told her, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do at this point. So they had to, even though she really needed Medicaid, she had to wait it out. And she ended up moving to North Carolina anyway. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's those circumstances where, the adult kids mean well.
Yes. Yep.
But kind of a similar reasoning that I guess that client had that we were talking about that was paying $10,000 a month. They mean well, but they don't want to pay to meet with an elder law attorney for the guidance, and then it ends up being more costly in the end because either we have to correct things, maybe they've
Or
already
you
filed
can't.
and we have to file an appeal, or we can't. Yeah.
Yeah. It's gone
Yeah.
too far. Yeah. So that's probably why I work with elder law attorneys, maybe more than any other professional out there, is because the first thing that I tell them, if there are any kind of assets or there's any income more than $2,700, is contact your elder law attorney. Yep, it's probably several $100s for your time for a consultation, but I can't tell you how valuable that is. To not have a misstep like that poor family. They would never have done that if they had just had a little bit of legal advice. They would have known better.
I know.
And then they would have been able to sell the house at some point down the road and still have distributed the funds just like mom wanted. But the timing is everything.
Yeah, it is.
So...
It really is.
Well, these are really big discussions. And is there anything else that you were just like thinking, man, I just really need to share this today?
I just need to stress that if anybody's doing planning for somebody with special needs or a senior or anything involving public benefits, that you absolutely should go to an elder law attorney. Someone who just practices estate planning is not sufficient.
Yes.
And sometimes, unfortunately, there are some attorneys that will kind of dabble in these areas.
Yes.
And the clients end up paying the consequence. So
I am
there's
so glad.
several qualified elder law attorneys in the area. And I just highly recommend that if you're in that circumstance, that you absolutely
Yes, and
work
here's
with one of
why.
us.
I have a story for that. I had a family call me, and mom desperately needed the Long Term Care Medicaid. They had done the estate planning. They had put money into a trust, and they were prepared to get mom that coverage. However, the attorney never filed for it, and he said, "Wait until they're in a skilled nursing facility, and then we'll file." And no, that's not what she needed. She needed to go into an assisted living, and apparently he wasn't even aware that she could qualify for that assistance, and she could have been in assisted living for a year before they finally called me and said, well, now it's getting dire, so at some point I think she's going to fall and she's going to be in skilled nursing, and then we're going to file for the long-term care Medicaid. And I thought, wow, because they didn't go to an elder law attorney.
Right.
That's the advice that they knew best to give. And so this person was sitting at home needing care and not getting it.
And a lot of times when you're doing long-term care planning, Medicaid planning for a couple, more likely than not, you have to redo. If they have an estate plan in place, you have to redo it.
Yeah.
Just so that the person you're trying to qualify for Medicaid doesn't get kicked off of Medicaid when the surviving spouse dies. Or, when the other spouse dies.
Oh, yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you learn nothing today, other than before you do anything, when you're transitioning as a senior, if you're maybe going to benefit from long-term care Medicaid, maybe from some VA benefits that might be out there, please spend a little money and speak with an elder law attorney. Minerva is a great one here in our area. If you are not in our area, look around, ask your primary care physicians. They usually have some elder law attorneys that they work with, and just really do your homework and find yourself a good, qualified elder law attorney, and you could save yourself so much money, so much grief and heartache. Yeah. I just can't stress it enough. So Minerva, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And my audience, if you have not subscribed, I would love it if you would subscribe and hit that like button. But more important than that, share this with someone who is aging. So maybe a senior, maybe somebody who has small children, actually, and they need to start thinking about planning and preparing. Actually, this could be shared with anyone. So share it with everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.